Good morning and happy Monday to my 8th grade geography students. Today we're going to look at another part of Eastern Africa, the four countries of Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda, and Burundi. I hope you're studying that map. I know it's a lot, and there's a lot in Eastern and Southern Africa, but I promise you if you study the map and play the game, on the Centera website, it will help. I did it myself to refresh my memory. It's been many years since I learned the African map. So within about, I'd say maybe 10 to 15 minutes, I had most of the map down with no problem at all. But that's because I've studied it before. You guys are brand new, so take longer with it. Take a few minutes each day and study that map. Okay, so let's look at these countries. We're going to start with Tanzania today. Tanzania is a very interesting place because it has so many very unique geographical features. Four big things are in Tanzania. First of all, the Serengeti Plain is partially in Tanzania. That's a big deal. You got your large game animals there, the Serengeti. The second is Mount Kilimanjaro, the highest point in all of Africa. It's a volcano and it has snow on it year-round, despite the fact that Tanzania is very close to the equator. The third thing is about half of Lake Victoria is in Tanzania, the largest lake in Africa, the sort of the source of the Nile River, but we talked about that the other day, and we'll talk about it more later. So Lake Victoria, and the fourth is the island of Zanzibar, and we're going to talk about that today because it's part of Tanzania. Okay, so this is a country that was German controlled through the late 19th century into the 20th century. The British took it over after World War I when Germany lost all of its colonies. The land was known as Tanganyika when they became independent. In 1961, they named their country Tanganyika. But then when they took on the island of Zanzibar, I believe it was 1964. I'm not sure of that year, but it was close to that. Then they changed their name to Tanzania. Tan for Tanganyika, Zan for Zanzibar, put it together and they came up with the name Tanzania. Okay, there's Mount Kilimanjaro. It is up near the border with Kenya, but it is in Tanzania. Zanzibar is a large tropical island off the coast of Tanzania, and it was it was once the largest slave trading port in all of East Africa. It was controlled by the Arabic nation, and they traded slaves out of Tanzania. It wasn't Tanzania then, but out of that area. Okay, so this is going on to Uganda. I'm making sure I don't want to tell you anything else about Tanzania. I'm good, I think. Uganda. This is the capital city, Kampala. It is on a plateau, so it's fairly flat, averaging about 5,000 feet of elevation in the south, and then it falls to 3,000 feet up towards the north. Uganda is an interesting country. The capital and main port is Kampala, as I told you. It's on the northern edge of Lake Victoria. It's interesting to me because about half of the world's mountain gorillas live in Uganda, and I think they're interesting animals. There's only about 830 of them left in the world, and as I said, about half of them live in Uganda, and the other half are in Burundi. They live in an area that is known as the impenetrable forest, or the Bwindi forest, either one. They like to live at elevations of between 5,000 and 11,000 feet of elevation. Uganda has been independent from the British. The British were the first to move into Africa in the 19th century. But they've been independent of the British since 1962, but that does not mean that they've had anything but war since then. During Idi Amin's rule, Christians were intensely persecuted. Idi Amin ruled the country from 1971 to 1979. He was a brutal dictator, killed many of his own people. And as I told you, it is home to the mountain gorillas. Rwanda is the third country we're going to look at. It is landlocked, as is Burundi, that we'll look at next. It is about the size of Maryland, but it has a huge population density, about 1,200 people per square mile. It's just very, very densely populated. They are heavily reliant on foreign aid in Rwanda. Very, very poor country. They have 3 tribes of people that live in Rwanda: the Hutus, the Tutsis, and the Twa. The Twa are a pygmy race, and they're only about 1% of the population, so they really don't have a whole lot of influence in the country. But the Hutu and the Tutsi, the Hutu are the majority. They're about 84%, and the Tutsi about 15%. But the Tutsi, they tend to be very, very tall, like well over 6 feet, and they have been in charge of the country for a long, long time. They have, and they don't get along. The two groups. They gained their independence from Belgium, but they still continue with all these tribal conflicts. In 1994, the presidents of both Rwanda and Burundi were assassinated, and that began a horrible, I'd call it a civil war, but it was very one-sided, a genocide, really, of trying to get rid of the Hutu people. So, like Rwanda, Burundi is a small country with a large population and a large population density. Again, going to be heavily reliant on foreign aid. They received their independence from Belgium as well. And again, it's a lot of internal division, lots of violence in both of these countries. Coffee is a main export of both of those countries. In Burundi, about half of, excuse me, I keep going past that. There we go. About 500,000 people actually fled the civil war that was taking place there. They've since returned, but the country is attempting to stabilize and increase their education and their economics outlook, but it's a very difficult place. One thing I was going to tell you about is an interesting little note on page 481 in your book. It talks about marriage in Tanzania. We have had this discussion in class before, so read that note and see what you think. I'm very glad that I don't live in Tanzania and have my marriage handled like they do it there. All right, so that is it. But tomorrow we have quite a bit to go through with the Horn of Africa. We're going to look at Ethiopia, Somalia, Djibouti, Eritrea, many, many countries on the eastern coast of Africa on the Horn. So I will see you all then.